Yo, what's up? It's someone that's someone, and welcome back to another Story Mix. Today, we're looking at trips that feature spiders, a somewhat common hallucination that can be found across a handful of substances, most notably on deliriants, but they can be a theme within psychedelics and some others as well. And it's interesting to see the varied ways people will describe them, whether that be in a giant swarm, them being translucent, only seeing one spider, to seeing that one spider is giant, like a small animal, or even larger. And when we look at evolutionary theory, it's natural that we have a fear or danger response when we see a spider. So I wonder if some of these substances tie in with this. But let me know what you guys think about it, and if spiders have ever come up in an experience of yours. Besides that, I do want to note many of these were taken from various points at time, so the quality will vary. But if you want to see more of these, hit the like button and subscribe. I'm sure you'll enjoy this, so without further ado, let's dive right into this. Tripping sack on 10 milligrams tonight. Just as the title says, Benztropine is a medicine used for essential tremors, in my case at least, as well as a few other things. It has both dopamine reuptake inhibition properties and anticholinergic properties. Half of those of atropine by milligram. It's basically a euphoric deliriant as opposed to a dysphoric one. Unfortunately, due to my body temperature increasing, 10 milligrams is about the most I can safely take. I will describe my experience here. Taken 30 minutes ago at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. 1 hour in, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. I feel light. Music is starting to sound better. Mild closed eye visuals. Also, I just feel warm and fuzzy. But that's the dopamine reuptake inhibition, not the anticholinergic effects. 1 hour, 30 minutes in, 11 Eastern Standard Time. The walls are sorta ripping now, and the color fuck Pattersons are appearing. Here's the translation for that. The walls are sorta breathing now, and the colorful patterns are appearing. My room is menacing as fuck on this, and at night. 4 hours in, Eastern Standard Time, AM. Psst, absolutely. Fucking wasted, but having Adam's good time. Here's the translation for that. 4 hours in, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. Absolutely fucking wasted, but having amounts of good time. Spiders on my wall. This was lots of fun. I was able to experience hallucinations without the amnesia and fucked upness of DPH. The typing was sort of more like drunk typing rather than delirium typing. I could hold a thought together, and I knew I was high. Definitely try this if you can. It's prescription only for tremors, Parkinson's, or side effects of medicines. But it's worth it if you can find it. Hallucinating insects and people I know. It was a brisk fall Thursday, and I was tired and bored after a long day at school. I have done LSD and shrooms before and enjoyed the experience. In addition, I had also done nutmeg after hearing of its hallucinogenic properties, but felt little to no difference. My friend had told me about DPH tripping, and I was intrigued. The previous week, I downed an old bottle of DPH liquid that we had lying around. I went in and out of sleep the whole day, but no hallucinations. Anyway, I went to the store and obtained 3 20-packs of 12 milligrams because they were out of the 50s. When I got home, I got out a bowl and began to unwrap the pills, which took some time, and put them in the bowl. When I had finished, I had something like 40 tablets and began to take them. My tongue began to become tingly after about 20 of the tablets, and then went numb. I started a timer on my phone and began to watch YouTube or something. About 30 minutes in, I began to feel sleepy. I rolled over on my bed and pulled the sheets over my head. A few minutes later, I began to feel buzzy and strange. I felt a little paranoid as well. I did a quick cursory glance around the room to see if any hallucinations were occurring, and I noticed my chair moving. The top of it was waving, like it was trying to say hello to me. I think I waved back, but I remember a jolt of adrenaline when I saw things really start to move. I glanced down at my hand and noticed a large bump growing on my palm. I blinked a few times, but it was still there. The next thing I noticed was a crack on the wall near the ceiling. As I stared at it, it morphed into a spider, which began to crawl/run up and down my wall. I was a little freaked out by this, but stayed relatively calm. I noticed more little things in my field of vision as the trip began to peak, such as spiders and ants, or bugs on my wall, or flies flying around my room. At this point, I began to hear voices. They sounded like friends and family, and some were even whispering in my ear. I don't really remember much after this, but I do remember not feeling afraid, as if my emotions were dulled or blocked. A little while later, in an almost complete state of delirium, I noticed my principal standing in my room, staring at me menacingly. He's a tall, bald man. Picture grew, so this added to the creepiness. I got on the phone with my friend after attempting to text him because I couldn't remember anything about what I was going to say or type. I couldn't type more than 3 words at a time before forgetting what I was talking about. I also remember feeling really self-conscious about every word I typed, like I was being judged or something. At this point, I noticed both a man made of shadows collapse on my floor and melt away, and also saw a student from school standing outside my window on the roof. None of this seemed out of the ordinary, and I commented on this to my friend, who told me I should try talking to the figures in my room. I attempted to talk, but it felt like one of those dreams where you can't make any noise. The best way I can relate these characters/hallucinations is an episode of Black Mirror, Black Museum, in which a brain-dead murderer stares at people in a cell. After this, I lay back on my bed, only to find a transparent spider crawl across my sheets and a centipede which seemed to be missing some of its body as well. I poked at the bugs and one of them vanished. Again, I didn't find this scary or strange at all, which makes the whole experience more terrifying to remember. A little while later, restless leg syndrome starts up. I was a little scared because at this time I didn't really know what was going on. My legs had this built-up pressure which felt like I was being electrocuted. The only way to stop this sensation was to move my legs and torso. After about 2 more hours of slipping in and out of consciousness, not being able to speak, hearing whispers, seeing insects, and seeing fully formed people I knew standing in my room, I fell asleep. Strangely enough, I felt fine the next day and inspired and compelled to write about this unusual experience. LSD trip goes south. Substances taken. Start. LSD 600 micrograms. 1 hour 30 minutes in, wax oil, high dose. 5 to 6 hours in, DPH 75 milligrams. One day, one of my friends that I have not seen for a long time due to me being out of the country will be returning today. He informs me of the time we meet and where, and eventually I arrive. When I met him, I asked about the dope, and he takes me up into his apartment and into his bedroom. Once we get there, he shows me the LSD he got, and me wanting to trip the fuck out, I asked for 2 300 microgram water tabs, 600 micrograms in total, for $10. I got an ultimate best friend discount. My brother was also interested in tripping, so I asked my buddy for 1 250 microgram tab for my brother, and I'll give him the money from my brother another day. He's okay with it and hands me the tab. My 2 tabs had some cartoon display of a sunset, while my brother's 250 tab had a Doctor Who cartoon on it, and I pay him the money and we just hang out for the rest of the day. I get home at around 8:30 p.m. and show my brother what I have. He had a wax cartridge and a vaporizer with him, so we decided we're going to smoke it during the trip to get stupidly high. We both wanted to get fucked. He takes his tab at 9 p.m. and I dose 2 of mine a quarter after 9. The 2 tabs had no bitter taste, so I was sure this was LSD. I started noticing it kick in after 30 minutes of dosing. It was as if I was able to recognize patterns more easily. I began to notice faces on the wooden floor in the video game I was playing in. I decided to get up because now the body high was completely noticeable. It is like the feeling of coldness you get when someone passes by you, but all over your body and down your spine. I get up from my PC and go to my hallway, and then the trip hit me like a truck. I began to stare at a painting of Jesus, and it's as if the entire painting was animated at an infinite amount of FPS and an infinite amount of quality. The colors everywhere were shifting to different tints, and I was able to communicate with them telepathically. I go into my bathroom to see everything warping and breathing in a weird wavy motion and completely smooth. I stare at myself in the mirror and see myself be covered in beautiful rotating patterns. I cannot really describe in words how it looks. I go back to the hallway and see everything covered in Mayan and Aztec imagery, all transforming into new symbols. I return back to my room, laughing my ass off for no apparent reason, and turn to my brother's bed to see a queen of a kingdom on it. I communicate with it and cuddled with it in a euphoric state. I eventually listened to music, and I was able to see the music. I saw myself at a hospital in my peripheral vision in a sad part of the song. The melody seemed to be greatly intensified with notes you cannot hear sober. I smoked the wax with my brother 90 minutes into the trip. When it kicked in, I was gone. I believed my room was a spaceship and that nothing outside of it existed. I felt like I was not moving my limbs despite moving them. It's as if I was floating around my room. I end up talking a lot about deep questions and the answer to reality. I turn on the lights and my entire vision is composed of a kaleidoscope with each triangle looking like stained glass art. Can't really describe it. I lay in my bed and close my eyes for God knows how long and visit some new worlds and such. My closed eye visuals were just fully 3D and I could interact with them using all 5 senses. After I somewhat come back to reality but still gone, I look at my brother and I notice people on Instagram, they look way more attractive and they were moving or dancing in the photos. I was in a world known as the Gone. I could not remember who I was or where I was. Time did not exist, and I have broken the space-time continuum. My brother is also tripping, but is way more functional than I am. After 5 hours, I feel somewhat sober, but still hallucinating. I go downstairs to watch YouTube on the bed in the living room. Everything seemed to be intensified, and I was having complete synesthesia. I stare at the album art and see it just becoming pixelated and all beautiful and transforming. I felt like a rock star. I was able to see my thoughts project onto the TV. I don't know how to explain how that feels like. Then, I do the biggest mistake and take 3 pills of Benadryl for some reason. I do not know why. I browse Instagram, then, when the Benadryl kicked in, every photo became of low quality and all greens and blues are filtered out, but the people in the photos appeared to be more animated and the animations became more rigid and evil at the same time. I also had the thought that the only way to keep the time moving forward was to masturbate, and ceasing doing so would freeze time. I do my thing, and now my body feels really weird, and it felt like I was not stroking my own dick. Some time passes, and I start to see shadows with glowing red eyes come up to me, and the more I jerked off, the more angry they became. I stop, and they move the bed closer to the TV, put a table to my right, and served me wine. I was allowed to continue to wank. I have become the owner of a fancy restaurant and saw people around me sitting in the chairs chatting nonsense. I accept that I've entered a totally new world of weirdness and I want to see what happens. I began to hear screaming around me and tried to pinpoint the source. I looked to the floor of the living room to see a bunch of blue lines surrounding the furniture around me go down around them as if a video game was loading up. I then see a bunch of tiny soldiers place tents and shooting lasers at each other. Some of them had legitimate guns, but because Benadryl likes to be a little piece of shit, it made the bullets spiders. I was being shot at by them and didn't react much to it. I turn off the TV to go upstairs and see my entire downstairs part of the house just covered with dark spider nets that blocked any light from the other side. I was also covered with them, and they looked highly realistic. Sounds of bugs flying or like a swarm of bees was everywhere and all I heard. I, for some reason, think I have 5 seconds to go run through these cobwebs and spiders to turn on the light, or I'm going to die. I rush to the light switch and manage to turn it on. I go upstairs, and blood began to rail from the ceiling, and giant centipedes are crawling all over the walls. I go to my room to see my brother playing on my PC. My brother had a green aura around him, and I went to him, and I could see the entire environment shift to a happy one. I look into the mirror to see that my pupils have been dilated to such an extent. My blue eyes appear to be almost black. I have also noticed that I am unable to contract my muscles and talked extremely quiet and slow, along with staring off into space frequently. I appear to behave and look like an insane psych ward patient. I have a chat with my brother, and I admit to what I have done, and for some reason, I start to slowly get more anxious. I don't even remember if I was able to remind myself I was on a drug. The hallucinations look too real and scary. I eventually end up on my own bed with a green aura, and everything around us had a red aura. I heard bugs flying and spiders forming in numbers, just being copy and pasted continuously. I then started to see the blood drooping from the ceiling again, and I could physically feel the blood touch me. I automatically began to feel like I am extremely weak and old. I thought I was a 90-year-old soldier on the battlefield, looking at tanks and the enemies with knives launching at me, all in my bedroom. I looked at my brother's feet, and they start to rot like a crocodile addict. I tell him that if we even separate, I was going to surely be killed. We separated, which caused me to exit the green zone and enter the red zone. Then there were tiny little demons on everything around me and got strings attached to me, ripping my body into shreds, along with the lasers from the micro soldiers from before. I was able to physically feel being ripped apart with genuine sensations of pain. I jump back into the green aura around my brother, and everything goes calm again. Panic then just began to creep up on me, and then it was the end. I saw my brother put a shirt on, and the part of the body the shirt was covering wasn't there. I just saw right through the translucent shirt and was able to see the PC his body was supposed to be blocking. I saw my entire field of vision begin to deteriorate like that of a Windows Movie Maker fade effect. I was sure going to be killed over and over again for an infinite amount of time, never being able to escape hell. My brother was then being possessed by Satan. He started to grow a tail, but translucent, becoming more opaque slowly, horns on his head, pentagram tattoos, and very long vampire teeth. This was it. God was punishing me for wasting my life with drugs, and that everyone in my family will murder me. It is like God set up this moment exactly, all evidence to discard because a paranoia was being blocked by the red zone, and any attempt would result in death. I felt spiders crawling inside my stomach, esophagus, and mouth. I was apparently going to have to vomit them, but resisted the urge to, and kept trying to get spiders off my clothing and stuff. I was in this thought loop, and the intensity of the panic kept oscillating for like 3 hours, but I could not even understand what time was at the time. I eventually managed to get less psychotic and fall asleep for 16 hours. Never fuck with deliriants. They are the most terrifying drugs in existence and are extremely bad for your health. I hope no one goes through what I went through. 3 weeks in its reality. I first approached Brugmansia with great trepidation and expectation. However, my first experiences were disappointing. Smoked leaves had no effect. Smoked flowers caused a slight shift in perception, with pupil dilation and no hallucinations. Raw leaves and flowers can cause stomach pain or vomiting. My preferred method of consuming raw plant material is to chew it for several minutes, then spit out the pulp. I use this method with alcohol. 4 large leaves are enough to induce a mild sedation with a heavy/floppy body sensation without delusions. Pulped plant material was rubbed into my body, absorbing the atropine and scopolamine externally. I tried this method because I was too anxious about eating plant material or drinking tea. During application, Some fluid entered my left eye, causing long-term dilation and permanently deteriorated vision. This caused a minor shift in perception without hallucinations. Having tried every other method of ingestion, I wanted to try tea. I almost certainly drank too much because I was in a drunken-like stupor for 3 weeks while my dead best friend gave running commentary on my daily activities. This changed my life. I boiled 2 liters of water and added 16 finely chopped flowers, approximately 30 leaves, and a few thick stems. After straining, I shared 660 milliliters between 3 people, my friends Oliver, Dave, and Matt. The rest was frozen. The earthy brown liquid tasted bland and went down effortlessly. It didn't have any of the jelly-like gooiness of mushroom tea. We decided to vaporize some cannabis, eat some space cake, and then take a drive while it took effect. Around 30 minutes after ingestion, a dreamy sedation set in with free-falling sensations similar to ketamine or nutmeg, sort of like I was sinking into my seat. The same mundane views I see every day seemed outstanding, as if I were looking at them for the first time with the brightness turned up 10 times. I tried to drop my friends off at home so I could meditate back at my apartment without any distractions. But when Matt opened the car door, he collapsed headfirst into the pavement before staggering back to his feet and falling again. I got out with the intention of helping, but only succeed in making a public spectacle. We were in a busy part of town, and people were gathering in bewilderment. Someone shouted, "Oh my God, how pissed are they?" To cut a long story short, I returned home with Dave, who refused to get out, and left Matt to be escorted home by the police. We pulled up outside my apartment. Driving was easier than walking, and I staggered inside, leaving Dave alone in the car. I can't remember the first hallucination, or even when I began to think the tea was working. Every notion of the existence of a past, present, future, or even Brugmansia tea was gone. It was now just an empty shell in a blurry dreamscape of delusional chaos. Extreme dissociation left emotional concepts totally void. This felt quite liberating because there was temporarily no more desire, craving, habit, or fear. I have a phobia of spiders, but felt nothing when hundreds of hand-sized spiders scurried down my wall and into my mold-covered bed. The Grim Reaper stood in the corner of my room. I slurred, "Hello," and he waved back at me. Demonic bats flew at my head, and imaginary glasses of water moved back as I went to grab them. Fleas covered my ceiling and hopped upside down as if gravity had been reversed. I knew what I saw was impossible, but it looked too real to be an illusion. I grabbed a fly spray bottle and began spraying flea-infested areas. The interesting thing was that individual fleas dropped to the floor and died after coming into contact with the spray. I could fully interact with every hallucination. I lied in bed for a while, watching white doves swoop back and forth, pecking one another. I'm not sure if they were fighting or playing. They morphed into huge spiders, then again into insects. I then noticed a red dog tearing a chicken's head off a few feet in front of me. I reached out to touch them, but my hand went straight through. At this point, the doorbell rang. It was Dave, who had been sat in the car for a long time, asking the whereabouts of Matt. Neither of us had any recollection of abandoning him. "Come in, I think he's upstairs," I said. We spent a while looking for him. "There's definitely someone else here," I declare. Dave replies that he's also seeing people and sits down in the living room. I grew exhausted and got back into bed, but I couldn't bring myself to sleep, so I began walking into different rooms. Then I would forget what I was doing in there. Occasionally, I passed Dave on the way to the toilet and asked him what he was doing in my apartment. Sometime later, he walked home. The following day, he told me that he kept talking to Matt, then realizing he wasn't there. Deep into the trip, I become aware that I can move inanimate objects without the use of physical contact. Telekinesis seemed perfectly normal in Brug reality. With only a pointed finger, I could shift dog toys from one side of the hallway to the other. Each toy had a colorful trail as it drifted across the carpet. 14 hours after ingestion, I went to sleep in the living room because there were too many insects in the bedroom. The following day, I had work as a dinnerman in a local school. Still very high, I tried to phone in sick, but as the secretary answered the phone, I forgot who I was talking to and what I was supposed to say. I mumbled something about a friend in intensive care. The secretary told me I had to come to work, so I turned up in dark sunglasses, which I wore all day. I was now suffering from severe perspective distortion, which really isn't good when you've got to serve dinner to 75 kids. The problem I had with imaginary objects moving away from me was now happening with real objects. I made a fool of myself and resigned. My eyesight gradually returned to normal after 2 days, and the hallucinations tapered off over the following 3. However, the trip was far from over. I was in a drunken stupor for weeks and began to hear voices. Whenever I smoked cannabis, things really spiraled out of control. I became delusional and paranoid. The voices multiplied and became even clearer, and my entire field of vision was overcome by kaleidoscope patterns. These effects were enjoyable for a week, then the fear set in. I tried to write it out, but felt like a complete mess, and my family kept telling me I had taken too many drugs. After 2.5 weeks of delusional paranoia, I decided to throw away all of my cannabis plants and 3 ounces of high-potency cannabis. Within a month of sobriety, I returned to normal. The one thing that really amazed me about Brugmansia was the longevity of the experience. Please use with caution. Anxiety on THC and acid. I had planned on taking this LSD on a Saturday morning because that is when my mom leaves to work and doesn't come back until like 2:30. I went to sleep late and woke up early. When she was still here, she leaves before 8 because of the anxiety I was getting. I have a lot of anxiety. For example, the first day of school, I get no sleep at all because of it. I decided to take it right away so it would hit me when she left. So I did. I dropped the tab at around 7:10 a.m. and it started hitting me around 7:45 a.m. When I heard her leave, I got out of bed and went to check if she was gone, and she was. So stupid me made the decision to hit a THC cart before the peak of the LSD even starts. And let me tell you, I took like 3 to 4 decent hits. This was all in my room because I didn't have a battery at the time, so I had to use wires for it. So, fat ass hits. I kept looking at my room curtains, and I saw how the trip was getting stronger and stronger and more intense. My body had a bad vibe. I don't know if it was because of how I was using the cart or because of the THC high combined with the LSD. Now this is where my trip goes south. I stood up to check on my eyes on the mirror next to the door, but before I could do that, I spotted a spider underneath it on the floor. It looked the same color as my carpet, grayish, and it all happened so fast. So I left my room ASAP. I processed to go into my living room to listen to music on my Xbox to try and come down. But as I got to the living room, it was hell. Everything I looked at was spiders. Literally, everything I looked at was looking at me and was a spider. And I had the worst vibe ever. I turned on my Xbox and put on music to calm me down, but it wasn't working. So I looked for a video that is meant to be watched on a bad trip to calm you down. When I was watching it, I couldn't tell if the video was looping, as if they know what acid is like, or if it was me. The only good thing I got out of it was, ride the wave, don't resist it, and it did help a bit. I told myself I took a drug and nothing could kill me, but the spiders were still staring at me. Next thing I did was type in ASAP Rocky on YouTube, but it was weird because my mom told me last night that there was going to be people doing construction on our house, the front door. So every time I type a letter, I could hear a sound in the background, rom, rom. It was a loop. I finally finished typing it in and put on the LSD music video. It was kind of boring and wasn't helping me. so I clicked on the video called Lamborghini High. It was so trippy, and I thought they were telling me, this is how we get high, this is how it is, you know now. I was tripping balls. In my head I was thinking, this is how rich people get high. Your sister told you never to fuck with this drug. She said, edibles are a strong enough trip, but acid? No, no, no. I was just thinking in my head, damn, I fucked up. Next thing I did was go to my sister's room. I saw a body on her bed, but she was supposed to be at work, so I was confused. So I just left without really checking who it was. I went back to the living room. I still had that ugly vibe. And next thing you know, my mom walks in. In my head, no, what the fuck, she is supposed to be at work. She was in her uniform and all, and my eyes were blazing red. She said, hey, they're doing construction at the house. And I was like, yeah, I know. I ran to my room quickly, where I didn't want to go back because of the spider. I didn't know if it was real or not, and covered myself in my blanket, my whole body, as to not get seen, which felt like spiders literally, but I couldn't afford to get caught, so I tried not to think about it. She came to my room and said, what are you doing? Your sister's friend is making breakfast with your cousin. Come out here. I was like, I will in a minute. It made sense now. Her friend spent the night, and that was the body I saw in her bed. I was wondering to myself, did she know I walked in? She probably does, so I didn't go out there. Then my cousin, which is a female, came in my room, and when she did, her hair looked like spiders. But I felt really safe with her presence, so I told her, don't go anywhere, stay here. She continued talking to me about her drama, but I didn't care as long as she was with me. I asked her if my mom left, and she said, I don't know, probably. When she did, we went to the living room. They were both gone, but they were still doing construction on the house. I asked myself why mom left work and came by. That never happens. The Lamborghini High was on pause, and I played it, and my cousin was like, what are you listening to? The only thing it says is Lamborghini High. So she took the controller and put on Netflix. I wasn't having as bad of a trip anymore. I stayed watching the show and calmed down. But in my head, I was like, the worst series of events had to happen today when I decided to trip. At the end, I realized the reason I had a bad trip was because I smoked. I get a lot of anxiety when I smoke, so I told myself never to smoke on LSD again. Living an absurd nightmare. My friends and I used to take Cortisone/Robitussin socially, and it was really fun until we couldn't keep it down anymore, which only took like 3 months of semi-weekly use. We're really cheap, honestly, so when DXM was no longer an option, we opted for other cheap over-the-counter meds. First we tried Dramamine, which was absolutely horrible. Then we tried Unisom, our Benadryl, which comes with a more interesting story. It was about 6 p.m. when we got the pills from CVS, and not long after that, we downed them. We had a hard time swallowing them without gagging because they reminded us of the Robitussin. Smiley face. Anyway, to pass the time until they kicked in, we went to Starbucks. About 30 minutes into being there, I started having trouble keeping my balance. I also began hearing things. My friend was sitting next to me, and I remember him asking me, so, do you want it or not? And I got really upset because he swore he didn't say anything. It just really freaked me out because it was the first time I had ever hallucinated. So I got up to order a latte, and I suddenly noticed that I had become severely heavy in the legs, but really, really light in the arms. When I got up from my chair, I just shot forward, misjudging my balance. It was slightly similar to being drunk. So anyway, I ordered my drink, and my barista started saying strange things, and I would ask him what he was talking about, and he'd reply that he hadn't said anything. At that point, everything was very funny to me, because I knew I was hearing things that hadn't been said, and it was so strange to me. Right as I sat down again, I noticed my boyfriend staring off into the distance as he stopped responding to me. I got really freaked out and started yelling his name. After that, everything was a huge shock. He went into a seizure, and it was all a terrifying blur of paramedics, screaming, and the intensifying effect of the diphenhydramine on myself. When I was asked questions, I could hardly speak. I could hardly walk or move or comprehend anything. Terrified, as my boyfriend was carried out on a stretcher, I got into my car with my other friend and drove him home, because he was begging me to get him home. Then, not knowing what to do, I went home myself. I wanted to follow the ambulance, but I knew that if I went to the hospital, it would be a horrible mistake. Also, I knew his parents had been notified and would be with him soon. Back at my house, I tried desperately to dampen the effects of the drug so I could go to the hospital and be with my boyfriend. I tried lying down, but all that did was make me believe spiders were crawling on my bed, trying to make me fall asleep. I tried running around my basement to rid of the effects, but then I began to believe someone was chasing me, so I hid in my bedroom. Everything I looked at would twitch and blur. I have this big blue inflated ball, and I kept staring at it, and it looked like a ball of gas just floating there in front of me. I watched a man and his son have a conversation on the couch across from me. I saw a Russian spy staring at me from behind a stack of boxes, and a chandelier collapsed above my head. Of course, none of these things were actually going on, but the hallucinations just came one right after another without quitting. Eventually, I fell asleep on my bed, only to wake again about 20 minutes later. By then, it was about 10 p.m., and I knew I needed to go to the hospital despite my condition. So I went upstairs and asked my mother for directions, and she told me very simply, but I had an extremely difficult time understanding her. In my car, I hallucinated that my boyfriend was sitting next to me. He very distinctly said, "Emily, where are we going?" And I replied that we were going to the hospital. Then realizing he wasn't really there, I swerved and started screaming, "No, no, no, you shut up." I also kept hearing my cell phone going off, and I kept trying to answer it, but no one had called me. Finally, I got up to the hospital and tried to find the entrance. Unfortunately, after searching for about 20 minutes, I realized I wasn't at the hospital at all, but at a homeless shelter. So I got into my car and began driving again. I did eventually find the actual hospital, but by then, it was midnight. I called my mom and asked her how to get into the hospital because all the doors I found were locked. She got really frustrated with me and said she was coming to help me. Before she had a chance to get there, I did find the ER entrance, and I spoke to my boyfriend's mother, who said I couldn't go back into the ER room. Very frustrated, I left and couldn't find my car for another 30 minutes. When I got home, I found out my mom had gone to the hospital to find me. It all kept up until I had slept through 9 steady hours of the night, from which I awoke to the same nightmare I thought I had dreamt up. The next day, I did nothing but cry and relive the moments of my boyfriend's seizure. I could do nothing but sit and wait for news on how he was doing. It was truly the most desperate, fearful day of my life. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, imagining my boyfriend as a child, and wishing I had never met him so that he would be spared of this experience. I really blamed myself completely and irrationally. After diphenhydramine, I realized I had so much to lose. I swore to myself that I would never do any drugs again, and I promised myself I'd never let anything happen to my boyfriend again either. I would never recommend diphenhydramine to anyone. After the experience, I did some research into the drug and its effect concerning seizures, and apparently they are pretty common to the recreational use of diphenhydramine. My boyfriend's still waiting to go in for an EEG, but we're pretty sure he didn't sustain any long-term brain damage. And despite his being fine now, that experience was terribly painful, and I would never risk it again.